The pickleball accessory aisle is one of the most efficient machines ever built for separating new players from their money. Walk into any pro shop or scroll any gear page and you will find a wall of gadgets promising to upgrade your game: vibration dampeners, ball pressurizers, electronic scorekeepers, grip gloves, $300 paddles, and a startling number of them do nothing, the marketing claims. I went through what experienced players, coaches, and independent gear testers actually say about this stuff, stripped out the sponsored fluff, and what is left is a short list of accessories that serious players quietly consider a waste of money. Some borrow ideas from tennis that simply do not apply to pickleball. Some solve a problem you do not have. And one of them is the most expensive paddle on the shelf. We are going to count down 7 of them, explain exactly why each one fails, and tell you what to buy instead. No sponsors, no kickbacks, just what the gear actually does. Before the countdown, it is worth understanding the machine itself, because the accessories on this list are not random failures. They are the predictable output of an industry that found a perfect customer. Pickleball added millions of new players in just a few years, and a new player is the most profitable person in any sport because they do not yet know what they need and they are eager to fix that with a purchase. That combination of enthusiasm and inexperience is exactly what the accessory market is built around. The pattern repeats across nearly every gadget on the wall. Some accessories borrow their entire premise from tennis, a sport that looks similar enough that the logic seems to transfer, even when the underlying mechanics are completely different. Others are designed to solve a problem that sounds real until you examine it, the kind of friction a beginner assumes must have a product attached to it. And a few simply charge a premium for a number on a spec sheet that the player will never actually feel on court. What unites them is that they all sell certainty to someone who does not yet have the experience to know better. The experienced player has already run the experiment. They bought the gadget, used it twice, and let it disappear into a drawer, and now they carry a short list of gear that genuinely earns its place. The whole purpose of this field file is to hand you that experience without the wasted money, to let you skip the drawer full of mistakes phase entirely. So as we go through these 7, watch for the tell. Almost every one of them is either a tennis idea that does not apply, a solution to a non-problem, or a premium you are paying for something invisible. Once you can spot the pattern, the entire accessory wall stops looking like a toolkit and starts looking like what it is. Starting the countdown at number 7, we begin with the purest example of a tennis idea that does not survive contact with pickleball: the paddle vibration dampener. In tennis, a dampener is a small piece of rubber wedged between the strings, and it works because a tennis racket has strings that vibrate on contact. That is the entire mechanism. A pickleball paddle does not have strings. It is a solid composite face over a core, with nothing for a dampener to dampen, which is why experienced players and gear guides alike describe these as mostly marketing gimmicks. The product exists almost entirely because it looks familiar to anyone coming from tennis, and the familiarity does the selling. You are buying the visual logic of a solution to a problem your equipment does not physically have. Number 6 follows the same logic into the ball bin, the ball pressurizer. In tennis, pressurized balls lose their bounce over time as the internal air escapes, so a pressurizer canister that keeps them under pressure genuinely extends their life. Pickleballs are not pressurized. They are simply molded plastic with holes, and their performance degrades from cracking and wear, not from losing internal air. A pressurizer canister does nothing for them because there is no pressure to preserve. It is a real product solving a real problem from the wrong sport, sold to players who reasonably assume that if it exists on the shelf, it must do something. Both of these are cheap mistakes individually, but they are the clearest possible illustration of the pattern. Gear that borrows credibility from tennis and counts on you not checking whether the underlying mechanism even applies. Quick one before the next item. Everything I found going through the 2026 gear and paddle market is in one place: the paddle trap, dossier number 01, what the power cap actually changed, what your money really buys, and the 9 paddles that quietly beat their price. 27 pages, real paddles, real prices, 0 sponsors. The link is in the description. Now stay with me, because the most expensive mistake on this list is still coming, and it is the one almost every new player makes. Number 5 moves from the ball bin to the scoreboard and into a category of accessory that fails not because it does nothing, but because it charges you many times over for something a cheaper item does just as well: the electronic scorekeeper. Keeping score in pickleball is genuinely confusing, especially the server number, and the question of what the score is may be the most repeated phrase in all of recreational play. So the problem is real, and that is exactly what makes this one effective. The trouble is the solution and its price. Electronic scorekeepers often run $40 or more, packing in batteries, buttons, and digital displays to solve a problem that a simple wristband scorekeeper with rotating number dials handles for around $12. The wristband does the identical job, never needs charging, and cannot break the way electronics do. Paying the premium buys you complexity, not capability. Number 4 returns to the tennis borrowing pattern from a different angle: the pickleball glove. The pitch is reasonable on its face, that a glove improves grip and prevents the paddle from slipping in a sweaty hand. But most players find that a glove actually reduces feel and paddle control, dulling the direct connection to the paddle that touch and finesse depend on. And pickleball is a sport where touch matters enormously. The irony is that the underlying problem, sweaty hands, has a better and cheaper solution that experienced players reach for instead: a good overgrip, particularly a dry feel grip designed to get tackier as your hands sweat. The glove adds a layer between you and the paddle to solve a problem that a better grip solves by improving the paddle's surface directly. For players, the lesson across both of these is the same: the existence of a problem does not validate the product marketed at it, because the smarter, cheaper fix is usually already sitting in the grip aisle. Number 3 is the most expensive entry on this list, and the one the entire accessory industry would least like to see on it: the $300 flagship paddle for the player who does not need it. Let me be precise here, because this is opinion grounded in fact, not a blanket claim. A premium paddle is not a scam, and at the highest levels of play, the added feel, spin ceiling, and consistency of a top thermoformed paddle are real. But the gains above, roughly the mid-price tier, are incremental, not transformational, and the number of players who can actually access them is far smaller than the number who buy them. This is why a recurring complaint among experienced players, surfacing again and again in gear discussions, is a simple question: does anyone really need a $300 paddle? The honest answer for most recreational players is no. The reason traces back to materials. The Toray T700 carbon that defines the premium face is a standardized grade, not a proprietary secret, and it now appears on paddles costing under $100 over the same kind of core, often using the same thermoforming process. The performance gap that survives all of that comes down to refinement and tuning, the last few percent, and the last few percent only matters to the hands skilled enough to feel it. A 3.0 or 3.5 player paying triple for a paddle is, in practice, paying for a ceiling they will not reach for years, if ever. The money would do far more for their game spent on court time, coaching, or simply a quality paddle under $100 that they are not afraid to use hard. For players, this means the most expensive accessory in the sport is often the clearest waste of all. Not because the paddle is bad, but because the price buys a capability the buyer cannot yet use, sold on the comforting belief that spending more must mean playing better. Number 2 stays on the paddle but moves from price to a spec that actively works against the new players who chase it: excess weight. There is a deeply intuitive belief among beginners that a heavier paddle means more power, and the logic feels airtight: more mass behind the ball should send it harder. In practice, it is one of the most common and costly mistakes a new player makes. As one paddle company founder and high-level player put it bluntly, the biggest mistake he sees from new players is buying a paddle that is too heavy because they think more weight means more power, but they end up fighting the paddle instead of the ball. That phrase, fighting the paddle, captures the real cost. A paddle that is too heavy slows your hand speed at the kitchen, where quick exchanges are won and lost, fatigues your arm over a long session, and raises the risk of the elbow and shoulder strain that sidelines so many players. The power a beginner imagines they are gaining is more than offset by the control, quickness, and endurance they are losing. The common guidance is to stay under about 8 ounces until you have played for several months and genuinely understand your own game. Then adjust from there if you have a specific reason to. And here is the part the heavy paddle buyer rarely hears. If you eventually decide you want more mass, you can add it precisely and cheaply with a few grams of lead or tungsten tape, tuning the weight and balance to your stroke rather than buying it baked in and immovable. For players, this means weight is not a feature to maximize but a variable to dial in, and the beginner who buys heavy in pursuit of power has usually bought themselves a slower, more tiring, more injury-prone paddle instead. Number 1 is less a single product than an entire category, the one that quietly drains more money than any gadget on this list. Novelty gear that looks great online and never leaves the drawer. This is the catch-all for every accessory bought on impulse and emotion rather than use, and it is number 1 precisely because it is the most universal. The over-personalized merch that seemed essential at checkout and irrelevant by the next session. The foam trainer balls marketed as a performance upgrade when they are really just a quiet practice tool. The matching accessory sets, the decorative add-ons, the gimmick gadgets promising a shortcut to a skill that only court time can build. Independent gift and gear guides name this mistake directly, warning that the obvious error is buying something that looks cute online but never gets used. The item that fails not because it is broken, but because it was never going to fit how the person actually plays. The tell is always the same. Novelty gear is sold on identity and emotion, on the feeling of being a pickleball person, rather than on solving a real problem you encounter on court. And that feeling is a powerful thing to sell to new players who are excited to belong to the sport, which is exactly why the category is so large and so profitable. The antidote is a single honest question asked before any accessory purchase. Does this fit how I actually play, travel, and organize, or does it just look like the sport? Gear that answers yes earns its place in the bag. Gear that answers no is the drawer filler this entire list has been circling. For players, this means the most expensive accessory habit is not any one gadget, but the pattern of buying the sport's image instead of its function, and breaking that pattern saves more money than skipping any single item ever could. So if those 7 are the waste, it is only fair to flip the field file over and show you where the money actually belongs. Because the same players and testers who dismiss the gimmicks are remarkably consistent about what earns its place. The list is short, boring, and genuinely effective. First and most important is the overgrip, the single highest value accessory in the sport. Your paddle's factory grip wears out fast, often within 10 to 15 hours of play, and a fresh overgrip restores tack, absorbs sweat, and keeps the paddle from slipping, all for a few dollars. Serious players replace theirs every week or two, and a dry feel grip in particular solves the sweaty hand problem that gloves only make worse. Second is proper court shoes, and this one is closer to safety than performance. Running shoes are built to absorb impact moving forward, but pickleball is roughly 80% lateral movement. and a cushioned running heel that rolls when you lunge sideways is exactly how ankle injuries happen, not dramatically but gradually. Court shoes with lateral support are not optional gear for anyone playing regularly. Third is a real bag with actual organization, which sounds minor until you have shown up to a session and forgotten a spare grip, a ball, or your registration card, and learned how much focus gets wasted on gear logistics. Fourth, for players over 40 or anyone with knee sensitivity, compression sleeves provide mild support and warmth that many use preventively, not just for existing injuries. And fifth, a simple $12 wristband scorekeeper, the cheaper answer to the very problem the electronic version overcharges for. For players, this means the entire honest accessory kit, the gear that genuinely improves comfort, safety, and play, costs a fraction of what a single waste item on this list does, and every piece of it solves a problem you will actually encounter on court. So step back and look at the whole pattern, because every item on this list, the waste and the worth alike, comes down to a single question. Does this gear solve a problem you actually have on court, or does it solve a problem someone needed you to believe you had? The vibration dampener and the ball pressurizer borrowed their premise from tennis and never checked whether the mechanism applied. The electronic scorekeeper and the glove charged a premium to solve problems a cheaper, better item already handles. The $300 paddle and the overweight paddle sold capability the buyer could not use, and the novelty gear sold the image of the sport instead of its function. Run any accessory through that one question and the marketing falls away, leaving only what the gear actually does. That is the entire method of this channel, and it is worth being clear about why. The accessory industry has every incentive to blur the line between useful and useless, because the useless side is where the margins live. Almost no one is paid to tell you to skip the gadget and buy a $6 overgrip instead. So if this field file saved you from overpaying, subscribe and stick around, because this is the one pickleball channel taking no sponsor money and no kickbacks and saying plainly what the gear actually does. That independence is the whole point, and it is the only reason you can trust a list like this one. Next field file, we are going deep on the paddles themselves, the 9 models that quietly beat their price in 2026. And the one spec the brands keep off the box because it gives the game away. Until then, ask the question before every purchase. Carry the short, boring list that actually works, and keep your money where it belongs, on the court, not in the drawer.